Good afternoon. It's Automate Live, day 3 here at Automate 2026. We're going to be talking about the cognitive capabilities of robots. My name's Chris Lukey, host of Manufacturing Happy Hour, and I'm joined by Eugene Banks, COO at Level AI. Eugene, welcome to Automate Live.
Hey, how you doing, Chris? I'm happy to be here.
Doing well, and in the spirit of the way I host a lot of my conversations, I do it in the style as if we're having a beverage with one another.
All
So,
right.
how do you describe what Level AI does when you're having a drink? Say it like the Automate after parties or side parties and things like that.
Yeah. Say I'm hanging with my friends or my colleagues and they're having a drink and they're saying, what does this level AI do?
Yeah.
Right. And how do you explain it in some simple terms? I'll say, you know what, just like we have to go to school and learn, like if you got to learn something new and somebody to train and bring you up to speed on a new task, robots need the same thing, right? They
Yeah.
have to actually learn and it takes time. And I
Yeah.
think, some of the things that people don't realize is how much time it takes, right, to
Yeah.
actually train a robot and bring it up to speed on new tasks. So we help you actually do that much faster, right, than traditional ways of learning. So think of it
Okay.
as a training academy. You're going to school for
Yeah.
robots.
Yeah, I love the way you described it there and right before the interview. You're sending robots to school, right? So
Yeah.
you're sending robots to school. Let's go about it this way. You're sending them to school to do what, right? What is the pain that you're solving for the industry?
Yeah. So think about the challenge, right? Even on the show floor here at Automate, a lot of the robots here are teleoperated or they've been pre-programmed to do certain tasks. As soon as you need them to do something else, right, they can't. Even if
Yeah.
I took a robot who's doing a great job, maybe he's demonstrating putting something on a table or out there dancing or doing different types of things that show the degrees of freedom, but I need to put a pencil on a pencil sharpener, it can't do it.
Yeah.
The amount of training that actually goes into getting these robots to do specific tasks, especially if you take that and apply it to industry like manufacturing, supply chain, and logistics,
Yeah.
is immense.
Yeah.
So if I actually make an investment as a company in these very expensive robots, and now I need to actually train them to do certain tasks, I got to make sure that I can bring them up to speed quickly, or I'm going to experience downtime or other challenges, right? And as well as I'm not going to get the return on investment of that robot that I just invested in.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, take us behind the hood a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you solve this problem and what's the business outcome when you're able to provide the solution for a manufacturer, logistics company, any industrial company, if you will?
Yeah. So you think about these different companies, right? Some of these companies, they're moving from this, low mix, high volume, rigid
Hmm.
robotic type world to more of a high mix, right? Low volume. So that means they have different products, multiple SKUs they need to build for. So they want to be able to repurpose these robots to do different types of training tasks. That means they need them to be able to adapt and do different things. One of the things that we actually are able to do is that we're able to train these robots on new tasks, but we do it in a way that's a bit unique to the industry, is that we give these robots cognitive capabilities by building multi-agent brains. So
Yeah.
we're actually using AI agents, right, to understand what the task is through allowing people that are maybe not roboticists or AI scientists through natural language to prompt that task and actually tell it what it needs to do, bring it up into a simulation so you can simulate what that actual task is that needs to be done, and then evaluate it over time to make sure it can get it right.
Yeah. All right. Multi-agent brains, setting those up. I'm curious who are you serving right now? Who is the ideal person to leverage something like this?
Yeah, so definitely discrete manufacturers, they may be doing things like, you know, deburring, and or they may be doing things like bin picking or actually moving, materials from one place to another. So discrete manufacturers, companies that are focused on supply chain logistics that need to actually optimize efficiency around their assembly lines, companies that are focused on materials handling. So you think about warehousing and they have to get logistics and manufacturing goods from one place to another. Those are the target customers that we're serving.
Okay. Now, how do you go to market then? How is, what's the business model a little bit? Take us behind the hood there a little bit.
Yeah, so similar to, we put, all of us, if you have kids, I have 4 kids, and tuition is quite expensive,
Yeah.
so, when you're going to put kids through school, you want to know, what are you actually signing up for and then how much, are you going to take? So we actually charge by training credit hours, similar to like when you go to college. So we're not selling tokens and things along that to actually be able to use that. We're actually charging you for the amount of training that you're going to do. So it's training credit hours that you purchase as a result of the training that you're doing with the robots.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one question I'm curious about is this isn't like a feature, if you will, right? This is more of like a category you've created. Tell me if I'm on the right track there, but how would you characterize it?
Yeah. So what I would characterize it is different than other companies, right? Who do training, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of companies that do training of different types of robots. What we're doing that's a bit unique is that we are embodiment or robot agnostic. So meaning that we don't care about the type of robot that you're training, as long as that robot actually leverages the robotic operating system or ROS2, or it has open APIs that can support, we can actually bring those robot embodiments into our platform and train them. The other thing that we're doing that's a bit unique is that we're not model specific. A lot of companies are out here trying to build models, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're out there constructing their own models for the specific robots embodiments, and then they're limited, right, to the amount of knowledge or physics that they have around different robots. We leverage, a lot of the vision language action models that are currently out there and are available
Mm-hmm.
today, as well as we can leverage large language models to be able to train these robots. So that's one of the unique things that we're doing that gives us, kind of a bit of a category. Also, we're the only training, engine that actually runs completely in the cloud. So to do
Yeah.
a lot of these trainings and these physics, it requires a lot of compute. We have a multi-service architecture that actually allows you to actually be able to, leverage as much compute as you need from different sources. So I'm not limited, right, to only just working with one vendor. I can get compute from GCP or AWS or Lambda or anybody that I
Yeah.
need to be able to train.
So I'm going to change up some of the questions here a little bit from being specifically about Lovell and robotics to being about Lovell AI as being a relatively new entrant into the market, all things considered. Newer company. I think you said it's been around for about a year.
Yep.
What's it been like being a new entrant into this space? And I guess to preface it with, you're not the only new entrant, right?
That's right.
There's a club of people that are, brand new to this space that are shaking things up. What's that been like so far?
Yeah, what I'll say, it's definitely been fast moving. Like any startup, we had an idea. We looked at a pain point and problem that companies were having, and then one of the things we saw was when we walked into some of these manufacturing environments, there were robots sitting on the floor and up against the wall, and we were like, you know what? Why are they not actually out on the floor? And they were saying, hey, because we can't repurpose them and use them. So we had this idea of how to solve it. What we didn't know is if our idea was the right one. As a startup. So we're, the task or the challenge that we had was, are we taking the right approach, right, to actually
Yeah.
make it more useful for these companies to be able to use it? And what we saw is that right out of the gate, companies became very interested in our approach, and everything is very fast moving. So for a startup that's limited, right, in funding, limited, right, in the amount of resources it can have, we found ourselves having to meet with investors very quickly. We found ourselves getting engaged with more customers, right, and having to invest more in the product in order for us to be able to, iterate and get the customers what it is that they needed in order to be able
Yeah.
to solve the problems they were having. So yeah, it's very fast moving for a startup.
What tips, especially that you've like from lessons you've learned in the past year, what tips do you have for the manufacturing and automation leaders out there listening to this conversation on how to build credibility as a new company, a new brand? In many ways, just a new it's a new technology that's entering this area. How do you build credibility?
Yeah, definitely listening to the customers, right? Like focus on the problem that the customer is trying to solve, and understand what that actual outcome is. And when you build your technology, build it for those specific needs, right? One of the things I tell different companies and other, we're at the table when we're having startup conversations, right? Is that when you start technology first, right, and try to get customers then to fit into your technology, you're probably going to be challenged. You're going to have to pivot, and iterate, right? Spend more money on things that you may have built before. That you're losing, right? The investments and things that you've actually made in the business. Listen to the customers, talk to them, get an idea of what it is they're trying to solve for. And once you understand that there's actually a business problem that you can solve for in mass, then make sure that you're actually building for that.
What excites you about this particular era of physical AI that we're living through right now?
I think the thing that excites me, right, is that, just like any other industrial revolution, that we've been through, um, the capabilities about how vast, physical AI, can actually help human beings, I think, be able to accomplish more tasks. I don't see physical AI as being a disruptor where it's actually going to displace human beings from being able to do different jobs. It's actually going to create different types of jobs that we participate in. And I actually believe that physical AI is going to allow us to be able to do things that we weren't able to do in the past more efficiently and more rapidly.
So that's one thing that's exciting you, or I should say, a couple things that are exciting you. What's one area, as you've been having conversations with manufacturers, logistics companies, that's still a misconception or an area where they think they're ready for AI, but there's steps they need to take before they're ready to implement. What are some of those, let's say, challenges that you're encountering?
Yeah. So some of the challenges, especially as a company that leverages AI, obviously we leverage agents, right? And we build brains, is that,
Mhm.
we're taking the whole deterministic piece out of it, that we're removing, humans in any decision making, right? Around what these robots are going to do. And
Yeah.
that's something that's actually not, I would say, is a misunderstanding, right? That the
Mhm.
clients are having. As we're, working with these different robots and we're programming them, and you want the human in the loop and you want the human to be a large part of, helping identify not only what the actual task that's going to be done, but how it's going to be solved as well with the AI as a part of it, right? So that
Yeah.
human in the loop is just an important piece.
So, one or two final questions
Yeah.
here. First one, this is a manufacturing happy hour classic end of interview question. We've covered a lot of ground so far. Is there anything you wish I would have asked that hasn't come up yet?
Is there anything I wish that you would have asked that hasn't come up yet? Is you know, what is Level AI, I guess, going to do that's going to be different than everybody else out
There
there?
you go. Yeah. What is Level AI going to do that's different?
There's tons of companies that are out here on the market, and they're all saying that they're doing something unique, with
Yeah.
AI. And I think, where, we're changing the game that's a bit different, right? Is that, we have an offering, right? It's not just about simulating training, within the simulated environment and teaching them a new task, but it's how does this actually apply to the physical world? Where our patents and things center around for our technology is something we call CL2A, or continuous learning to agent adaptation. It's where we actually go from so a simulated environment of teaching a robot, to the real world, and then back to simulation. So we actually create a closed loop of learning, right? That allows us to continuously iterate and teach these robots at a different time. That's something I think is very unique, to
Yeah.
our approach that we're taking.
So I said I had two questions. So here's the last one. What's your
All right.
final call to action piece of advice for the audience?
My final call to action, is, guess what? Buying the robots, that's the easy thing. Getting the robots to actually be useful, within the environment is the hard part. So, take the time, to work with companies like Level AI, understand, what it is that you're investing in. You can use Level AI almost as a simulation engine to determine what embodiments or robots you want to be able to purchase beforehand. Or if you have existing embodiments, evaluate, right, what new tasks and things that you can, use them to do, right, versus just investing in new robotic technology.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a lot of great things for the market. One of the quotes as I was getting prepared for this conversation I came across was, manufacturers don't have a robot problem. They have a make the robot useful problem. And that's measured in months and specialist hires, not a piece of hardware. So I think that's a real nice way of thinking about what you're doing for this industry, how you're help changing it, and what makes you different at the end of the day.
I appreciate that.
So I appreciate you jumping on. Eugene, thanks so much for being a part of this conversation here at Automate Live.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. We'll be back with more Automate Live very soon.
Hey, thank you.